Let's rejoin Catherine Herridge, our chief intelligence correspondent in the Washington newsroom. Catherine, great job going through this on the fly. Right before the break, you talked, and you'll pick up on this with what else you've uncovered about page 4. And I was looking at it as you were speaking when we took our commercial break, and they're talking about these FISA renewals, talking about the Department of Justice providing information obtained through multiple independent sources that would corroborate the famous or infamous Steele memo. And right below that, when people click on this online and see it, almost all of what's below that 3 bullet points is redacted. So I guess we don't know what those sources are.
We don't know what that is, but what jumps out at me is that this does appear to be in direct conflict with what then FBI Director James Comey testified to before the Senate Intelligence Committee, that several months later, with the incoming president, when he briefed him at Trump Tower, he briefed him that these allegations were largely unverified and salacious. So this seems to be a far cry, or there's a lot of daylight between what Comey testified to and what's being claimed in the Democrats' memo. I'm now halfway through at page 5, and I want to draw your attention rather to a key section right here, and it goes to one of the central findings of the Republican memo, that the dossier's funding, that it was funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign, that this was never directly shared with the National Security Court that granted the surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. And their argument is that the court really should have known the specifics of this research document and that there was really an agenda behind it. And what the Democrats write on this front is that the information that the dossier was a political document was shared by the FISA court, but that issues surrounding the specific identities of the individuals and groups involved were not shared with the court. They were shielded, and to use my own language, this was in keeping with the FBI's standard practice of trying to protect sources and methods. You and folks at home can decide whether that was a legitimate use of that shielding tactic in this particular case. So rather than tell the court it was the DNC and the Clinton campaign, they chose to use language such as person 1 was hired by law firm 1, then used a research firm 2 in order to put this information together. So they describe it as a political document, but they do not get to the specifics of the DNC and the Clinton campaign funding it. Now, one of the critical issues in the Republican staff memo is that Christopher Steele, his contact was terminated with the FBI after they concluded that he had lied about his contacts with the media. He was directed by Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm, to brief a half-dozen American media outlets about the findings of the dossier in an effort to sort of seed that narrative in media reporting. And what the Democrats' version says right here is that once the FBI cut off contact with Christopher Steele, the British spy, this was shared with the court, and they also shared with the court in the January 2018 renewal. So there were multiple renewals of the surveillance warrant for Carter Page. That one of the reasons Steele had made disclosures is that he was extremely frustrated with Director James Comey's decision to reopen the Clinton email case just 10 days before the 2016 election. So they talked about Steele's frustration with Comey, though I've yet to see a reference here to Steele's own statements that he had this sort of personal animus and wanted to do whatever it took to stop candidate Trump. Final point before I send it back to you. There's been widespread reporting that the FBI paid Christopher Steele for this work on the dossier, but the Democrats' memo states very clearly that the Justice Department never paid Steele for the dossier work. It was correct that the FBI had authorized payment for the work, but in effect the check was never written and sent and cashed by Steele. So they authorized payment, but ultimately, this is a quote, ultimately never received payment from the FBI for any dossier related information. So in summary here, they make the argument that the FBI and Justice Department really did everything they needed to do when they told the FISA court it was a political document, the Trump dossier. They didn't feel, because the FBI has standards in terms of shielding sources and methods, they didn't need to get into the specifics of it was the DNC and the Clinton campaign that paid for it. Number two, they say that they shared with the court that he had been terminated and that he, was personally angry with Director Comey for reopening the email case just a few days before the election because this was very damaging to her prospects. And number three, they make the case that Steele was never paid by the FBI for his work.
Okay.
So I'll let you know as I get more.
Exactly. All important
All right,
points.
thank you.
Catherine, thank you.